not only are these not magic answers, but there's such a variety of experience levels in this room. So what I've done, figuring that, is a kind of, it's not like a model of how to do this. It's kind of my, I don't even know, hard-won philosophy. Just, it was really good for me to put this together and think, what do I actually think about? So I don't, it's more in a list format than in like an organizational, this is how to do it. And it's more just thinking points. So kind of designed for, maybe you take away one or two things that you hadn't thought of. Maybe there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that you had, but it's more, I'm aiming for the one or two things that might help at some point. Some of this is received wisdom. Some of this is frankly idiosyncratic. You know, just take what works. We start. Donna asked me this question right as I walked in. How do we take less time grading? So again, because of level of experience, some of it. Well, I've struggled with this with both of these. Sometimes I think I'm taking too much time. Sometimes I actually think I'm taking too little. There are certain papers, at least, where I read this like I have nothing to say. So I'm trying to think through both of those. And we'll start off with the too much time or effort expended. What do you do when you feel like you're laboring far too long over a set of papers? Limit your comments. Do not ever be exhaustive. That freed me up so much. As a conscientious young grader, I was like, you know, I've got to really just map this out, and you know, if there's a comma missing, I feel obligated to put it in. No. In gen ed classes, maximum of 4 comments, and by this I mean at the end, at least one positive, at least one negative, so no need to be exhaustive. They're not going to remember. They might remember one or two things that they apply to another format, but certainly not all of them. These should address patterns of error, but most important, deep structural or conceptual issues. Surface errors are important, but surface. You want to look through a clear window, but the more important thing is the view. So certainly don't get bogged down on wording, on punctuation, on grammar. Usually again, those are the surface things. They're important there, but it's kind of a critical thinking. You want them, in order to think critically, to be asking the big questions, to be answering those. And I comment much more on the paragraph level. I'm much more interested in the structure, organization, thesis, and if I get around to commas, it's at the end. What I have done at some point is maybe mark commas for one page and say, you know, rather than marking 534, say, you know, here's 80 problems on a page. I could have kept going, but this is to illustrate the pattern that I see happening. Comment in direct proportion to the effort the student expended upon the piece. Upper level papers for me usually get a letter/note of multiple paragraphs at the end. And again, this frees me. In my classes, bad or bland papers don't get many comments because there wasn't much thought put in there to begin with. And I'll call it there's a low thought to word ratio. So there's just not much to actually talk to or talk with or talk about. Weightless, really. One of my favorite comments from a student back to me after receiving a grade is, I'm so glad I looked at the end of the paper to see that I got an A, because I would not have known it from the comments you put in the margin. And that was great for me. I mark up A papers much more assiduously than I mark up lower level ones. This summer I sent off a writing sample. It was a paper that I had graded, that I had actually looked at a second time, I think. Maybe not. You know, this was the third time I had seen it. And it was for a graduate level writing sample. And I sent this third draft back with 60 comments. And I was so proud. And I've had students, actually this particular student, describe it as a wall of red. You know, when you open up that file and, you know, there it is. Those are my A papers. Those are not my C papers, my D papers. Because those, when you mark them up, It's saying, I believe you can handle the criticism, and it's saying, I've invested that much time because I think it will pay off. If there's not much effort going in, then investing your time is just practically speaking not going to pay off at the end. You're better off with one or two general comments for improvement, in my experience. Not much to say. You can always talk about writing form, from thesis to organization to evidence and analysis, and I'm going to add writing style. These are actually my 4 categories. Your thesis, how that thesis, and more expanded, how that thesis affects the whole assignment, how it reflects, answers what the prompt I was giving accurately. The organization, the interchange between evidence and analysis, is your evidence specific enough, are you analyzing it appropriately? And then the final one would be writing style, under which I subsume all of this, points about grammar, sentence variety, length and structure, precise and flavorful vocabulary. Now, I really love language. I really, really do. And I'm really excited about teaching my students that it's possible to write interesting and academic at the same time. And in my experience, the keys to do that are those final 2 under writing style. You shouldn't use metaphor, in probably any of our disciplines. Although, I will say, this is, in one of my grad school papers, I sneaked in a metaphor about Faulkner being like an octopus, because he conceals himself behind jets of ink. I thought, I got away with that one. But if I saw that in a student paper, it's not quite the right tone. You've seen students try to stretch the creative boundaries in a paper and try to pull in ideas that try to pull in writing strategies that aren't appropriate. Sentence variety, long and short sentences, sentence structure, and precise and flavorful vocabulary are what I'll tell them are the 2 ways in which you can have an interesting academic voice. Someone will, you can pick words that no one else would pick, and you can use sentence structure that no one else would pick. And those, I think, will sneak by every academic censor of what it means to have an effective paper. And still keep the writing style interesting. In my dissertation, I found out one of my committee members coined a term called Schrockian syntax. Apparently, you can read my work and figure out that I wrote it and have it still be appropriate. And so that's one thing I challenge students about. The content, errors in fact, supplementary comments, simulated dialogue in the margins, perhaps paraphrase, perhaps adding implications. Find, errors in fact would be sort of a negative way to go at it. Supplementary comments would be, you've thought about this and I thought about think of something else related. Try your best to find something in their paper to talk with. It doesn't mean correct. It doesn't mean negative. It might mean this makes me think of something else that you might take into account. We'll get to this later, but to have the student realize that an interested person is reading their work and wants to engage with it, I think, and treat it seriously, no matter what kind of serious I've read professor comments where I had no idea what they were saying, but I just felt honored that, they recommend some book I'll never read or something, but I just wanted to hear that I had made them think a thought that they'd never thought before. And so some way to do that. Can certainly paraphrase. That's actually kind of a handy one. So what you're saying is this. It helps them with writing style, how to be more concise. And really, you don't have to do any creative thought. You're just saying this is what you're saying. And certainly perhaps adding implications. The whole person. Depending on your field, some of your papers might actually have psychological, spiritual implications, and just be alert to those. And when it comes to grading, you want to grade for the whole person, not just for the topic at hand. Now where this, and I teach capstone, so I assign some personal writing, and there's some of that. It's tough when you have to give a C to a heart-rending paper, or an A to an obnoxious one, and that's the hazard of assigning a paper that has personal implications. Is, I've given out, in capstone, I've given out B's this semester to really beautifully, the assignment did exactly what I wanted it to do, but the writing just wasn't enough. And so when I grade, I'll write this down. I'll separate. The assignment worked. It made you think what I wanted you to think from, but your writing style doesn't elevate it to an A level. Also, I've given an A, and then again I'm thinking of a particular paper where someone wrote a beautiful analysis of her 3 roommates. It was very sophisticated, very articulate, and just wrote them all off in contempt. And so I gave her an A, but I had some challenge, I challenged her on that. I didn't really respect that authorial persona. Justifying. Well, not justifying, but clarifying the grade. It's not, you don't have to justify why you gave the grade you did, but you want them to understand why you gave the grade you did. So this never defensive grading, but informative grading, I think, is really useful. And finally, on this slide, to rubric or not to rubric, I guess the verb would be rubricate, but fine, whatever. For those of you who aren't familiar with that term as much, I think for any discipline, you can make, for every assignment, a rubric that shows, what an A-level paper is like, what a B-level paper is like, what a C-level paper is like, and so on. And so when you hand back that assignment, you can, mark, underline phrases that show the student why they got the grade they did. My own history on this, rubricating was absolutely essential for me to develop as a grader. I graded for a year, just a bunch of comp papers, didn't know the terms, kind of had to think hard as I was grading about what words to use. When I got to Penn State for my PhD, they had rubrics, and they had us grade all the first year assignments using rubrics, and that was fantastic. And I picked up, and one of the reasons I put these up here, I picked up these categories: thesis, organization, evidence analysis, style. Those were the 4 categories of the Penn State rubric. And it gave me words and categories that I retain. I can just turn assignments around pretty quickly. But for me, it added a 3rd layer. I want to do the interlinear comments in the margins and in between the double space. I want to write comments at the end, just very specifically tailored to the assignment. And I was finding it actually, rubricating took me too much time, suspended between, do I underline this word or this word, especially when I was underlining a lot of B's, because B's are just sort of right there in the middle between A and C, which is usually what it is. And so B's tend to be, it's competent, it's fine, it's fine, it's competent, and what I really wanted to talk to them about were the A and the C parts. So for me, I needed the rubric, and I think at this point I've left it behind, and I try to keep those categories, but I try to comment on the particular, either the outstanding on one direction or another. Yeah. This really varies. Some people, it speeds up. Some people, it slows down. For me, it slows me down, even though I needed it. And finally, some general principles. This is something I'm just learning in a new way this semester. I'm really excited about it. Present yourself to them as someone interested in their work. Tell them how serious you are about their writing, if you are serious. I love to tell them, as I said, I care more about your writing than you do. And for the most part, that's true. But it's the word serious. It's, I want to have fun in the class, I want to have a good relationship with them, but I'm serious about the writing. And it really helps them buckle down, for sure. And then assign writing projects you want to grade. This is what I did, and I'm not sure if I should have told them this, but I did. I said, this semester, turning over a new leaf, assigning all the writing projects that I actually want to grade. They loved it. They were really excited that I actually was looking forward to reading their work as opposed to thinking of it as a kind of cross. They were almost, yeah, they want to bring us delight, not being our crosses. They want meaningful work. And this may be a key difference between high school level writing and college level writing. We are training them to do meaningful work. We're training them to do meaningful thought that has resonance outside the classroom. And if we can simulate professional interest, and if we can not even simulate, but bring professional interest by assigning writing projects that we're really looking forward to seeing what they come up with, that does a lot of work. I have other pedagogical reasons for assignment shaping, but this is one of them. And it was really cool. I tried a new assignment in capstone. They were supposed to analyze a passage of the Bible using the literary critical tools that they learned in their years in the English discipline. And that stack of paper sat on my desk for about a week. And when I looked at it, I felt happy thoughts. And that was so nice. Nice. So, yeah, it improved our relationship, I think, between teacher and student. Have an A mean something. Be easy to impress, but difficult to satisfy. The converse of that is some students will be disappointed, but I've just seen over and over again at Lee and elsewhere that if a student will get a lower grade, take that as a challenge, not as a defeat, work harder, it is so transformative, and it's something that I would not trade for everybody in my class getting A's. Clearly communicate your typical grading scale early so that they're not unpleasantly surprised. I'm told, I don't think this, I'm told by my freshmen that I'm one of the harder graders. Maybe I am, I don't think I'm that difficult. But I don't get a lot of resistance because I tell them early that if they get a B, I start my grading with a B. If you fulfill the assignment requirements, you get a B. If that's competence, that's a good grade, and then levels of being impressed go toward A, and levels of being, I guess the opposite of impressed would be depressed. Try not to use that word. Go toward C. There's something wrong with the way that you've fulfilled the assignment. You haven't fulfilled the assignment in a full enough way, and it's always different classes always react to that class period in different ways. Sometimes there's this sort of funereal silence. Sometimes students are kind of looking at the challenge. Sometimes they've already heard it from their friends who took this class before, and so they're just confirmed in their terror. But they don't often come and talk to me about their grades and complain because it's just out there right at the beginning. Write something yourself in your field and try to get it published. In the 3 years I've been here, I've done a decent amount of scholarly work, and I'm excited to find out how that affects the way I grade, particularly upper level. It keeps me up to date on the writing process, so I know what it's like to write 15 to 20 page articles. I know I'm in the research process. I'm sort of checking the same boxes, doing looking through the same material they are. I'm struggling with library resources, trying to figure out how to get the information that I want in the quickest way possible. And so I'm just immersed in that, and I'm better able to field their questions when they come. It helps me to understand what it's like to receive harsh criticism and revision suggestions when I send my articles off for review and they come back and there aren't, like gold stickers on it. So I know what that's like, and I know how to handle it. That sometimes makes me more patient with them, because I can sympathize. When I write harsh criticism, I know how to try to couch it so that it makes them not despair. But it also makes me less sympathetic with them in that, look, I'm dealing with it too. We all deal with it. You persevere through it, and so I'm less compassionate when they try to check out at that point. It keeps me understanding the personal and professional value of writing in my discipline, and I'm able to teach writing as if it means something, because it really does for me. I'm trying to enter the academic discourse as much as possible. One fun thing I do is I put together little packets of rejection and acceptance letters, and so every senior class, at some point I'll hand out, here's a cross section of all of my, a whole bunch of acceptances and rejections. One of the first ones I received asked me if I were a graduate student, which was just horribly condescending and accurate and painful. And so, I try to pack those negative ones in. Plus, it's fun to see professors squirm and be in pain. And then I do try to add the nice ones in there too. I've had rejection letters that are nicer than some acceptance letters. And then recently, what I've been able to do, I had a project that was rejected 4 times before it was accepted. And so I've been able to hand out a packet that said that you're able to follow this article all the way through patterns of rejection into acceptance. Now, that's the way you understand, that's the way students are able to imagine themselves into the profession, into the field. And it's also, I think, gives them the courage to persevere through failure, through revision suggestions, that kind of thing. Find outlets for student writing, oral or written publication, and have that ready at the end of the paper, or email them later. So, go find an undergraduate conference and plan on going there with some of your students. I think I did that with Shakespeare. There was Shakespeare class in the fall. There was a conference at UTK in the spring that was a medieval Renaissance conference, and I said, all right, people, I'm thinking of taking students to this conference. Write your papers so that I can take you there. And we took 2 people to that conference, and so they were able to, immediately. I think the whole point of this is to have them, from presenting yourself to someone who's interested in their work, to give them a purpose outside this self-reflexive, I'm writing this paper. Give them a sense of a professional audience who's you, and give them a sense of a professional audience who is the wider profession. And if you can do that, it just provides just much more motivation, I think, for them to do well. One of my teachers called it, she would say, this paper deserves a wider audience than the classroom. And I really like that way of putting it. Yeah, they really do want meaningful work. Another thing about that is we have an English symposium here on campus, and it's been really rewarding to, when I'm putting the symposium together and I'm trying to recruit our students to present in it, to email somebody and say, I remember your paper last semester, I think it would work here, submit. And I've had stories of transformation. I was a student thanked me at graduation for believing in me, and I thought, did I really believe in you? What was that about? And she said, well, I may have looked quizzical, and she said it was recommending my paper for the symposium. I was like, oh, okay. I'm glad you read it that way. Identify clearly what's interesting and exciting about a given paper. And this comes from our awareness of our discipline. For me as a writer, the thing that clicked in my mind, it's still clicking, it's still kind of firing and misfiring, is I know what I'm interested in. I'm not sure always what my colleagues are interested in. I'm not sure how my idea, I might have an idea about a text of Chaucer, which would be what I write on, but I'm not sure why other Chaucerians would be interested in it so I'm trying to learn the field so that I understand what other people will be interested in. Students, and I remember, I'm getting better and better at that. I remember writing papers in graduate school where I know what I'm interested in. I have no idea what the wider context for this paper is. I have no idea why my professor would be interested in it. And I would go to my professor and say, what's the value, what's the importance of this paper? And they would give me a wider context. So, if you can identify with your knowledge of the discipline why this paper would be interesting to someone who's not the writer, that's really powerful. And also just why you are. I had a student tell me she liked writing a paper for me and for another professor in the department because we would get really excited when she would come in for a paper conference. And just this semester, I was having a paper conference with somebody, and it's one of those things where you like pause, and you know that what you're going to say is going to mean something. And I said, "This is my favorite thing you've said so far in this paper." And it ended up being her thesis, and I thought that's probably what would happen, because I said it was my favorite. That was smart of her. But in general, I mean, again, I'm sort of editing or thinking about how this fits together as I go, because all of this is really kind of organically related to me, to surround the paper writing process with positivity and the paper grading process with positivity, so that even if they get bad news, it's the best possible bad news for them because they're taken seriously. Mm-hmm. Use your best critical acumen to locate the upper level papers within the disciplinary conversation and your best writing skill to convey it. If you like words, or if you like thoughts, your undergraduate students deserve your best thought, your best engagement with what they're doing. There is a tremendous power in a phrase, a sentence or two, to sum up accurately where a student is in their journey in the discipline, what a student paper is, how it fits into their development, so that they recognize it for themselves. So, and I've thought about these almost in terms of motifs or just phrases. And I remember, and this is kind of coming out of my senior advanced creative writing professor wrote, "Your prose is beautiful," at the end of one of my papers. It was like 4 words, but that is the thing, that is the comment that I remember from my undergraduate, all those papers that are graded. My dissertation director, I remember sending him off a paper idea, and I didn't think he liked me, and I don't think he thought he liked me all that much. But I sent him off this idea, and he emailed me back, and he said, "This is smart, work it out." So that was 6 words. And, I didn't go back and look at that email, even though I've saved it and engraved it on my heart. But I can quote it, because I know. And it's been really interesting. In 3 years already, I've had a phrase come back on a course evaluation. I wrote it on a student paper, and like a year later, I was like, "That phrase sounds familiar. I think I put that on her paper," and she put it on my course evaluation. So say nice things. That would be one. My favorite. So it doesn't have to be long to pack a punch. In fact, the opposite. My current favorite. I love to write "You're good at this." About once or twice a batch of papers, so you kind of save that for when it counts. But 4 words, and it makes a difference. There is such a power in someone older than you, hopefully wiser than you, probably smarter than you, looking at you with great seriousness and saying, "This is what I think about your work," and students are able to fold that into their identity, into their definition of themselves and the definition of themselves as a major, and even in the gen ed. So it may not take long, it may not take a lot, but if you take it seriously, that last bit, and know that especially the final comments, students will take to heart. Yeah. All right. That's what I have. And I suppose at this point it would be appropriate to open it up for questions, comments, disagreements, heckling, whatever you feel led to do.
Actually, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So when you have a paper that goes through multiple drafts and you comment on the first rough draft and then notice on the second one that they didn't change anything, how do you handle that?
With negativity, I think you comment on that and call them on it, and that's kind of, yeah. I mean, that's a breakdown in the process that you've set up, and it's a willful abstracting of themselves from the process. Yeah.
Then would you assign the same grade or say, please redo this and bring it back to me?
Assign the same grade. So do you grade every level of the draft? Yeah. Oh, I think your standards, I mean, this is just me thinking, so what is it? But I mean, if I were to do that, my standards would go up for each draft.
Oh, they definitely would.
Yeah, and so not changing means that your paper the grade goes down. Yeah. I don't grade every, so I'm trying to sort of imagine my way through. I read rough drafts of every major paper, but I don't assign a grade on them. Yeah, that's a whole pedagogical thing. Yeah. What I do, I don't, what I worked at the Penn State had a sheet of paper that had just columns of, in 4 categories. So thesis, here are 4 or 5 kind of, qualities of a thesis that they track from D to C to B to A. I don't use those sheets now. What I will do sometimes is to write those 4 categories on the board, to say I'm gonna grade these in your thesis and the assignment, or structure, evidence and analysis, and then style, and that's all I tell them is those 4. It can get kind of complicated in math too, depending on how conscientious you are. If you're tracking 12 or 16 characteristics of a paper from D to C to B to A, and you're underlining some in B and some in C and some in A, and some, you just look at this, again, it's like a wall, and you've got all these markings, and how that translates to a letter grade can be complicated.
It's probably not fair to ask English folks for sure, but most of my teaching with this level of grading is online, so this is not an indictment on the classroom English here. But I struggle with some of the writing ability for the papers that come back with just basic English.
Yeah.
So then I'm really struggling with, do I grade heavy on that, or do I look more at the content? And that is my greatest struggle with my grading is how much do I grade based upon basic English errors compared to content?
I could defer to people in this room who know a whole lot more about that than me, and perhaps feel free to chime in. My initial answer would be, there are classes where I care more about writing style than others. I mean, if they are writing classes, I'm going to be harder on the writing than I'm going to be if it's a non-writing class. And so I think that would be a judgment call for you to, if they have the ideas that you want. I really like the thesis, organization, evidence analysis, and style, because it compartmentalizes language as a quarter of your grade. So no matter how much you bomb that language section, you still have 75 points that remain. And you can kind of honor the level of thought that goes into it. My grading changes from class to class. I mean, I'm a more difficult professor in 100 and 400 classes than I am in 200 and 300 classes. And it's intuitive, but now it's becoming conscious. Like I figured that out and I'm okay with that because I want different things from each class. And so that's where I would like calibrate what you want and then kind of grade on that level. Do students expect A's across the board?
I think especially in writing they do. I think they think it's an A unless they do something wrong. And you're giving them 100 and deducting from the 100 so you get down, but then you have to explain what all those deductions are.
Right. I mean, and that's where, I mean, when I talk about it, I say I start off at an 85 and mark up or down. And they just, because they're trained from math and history and all this, they're trained from objective tests to think of the, 90 and 98 is 2 points of failure. Some of them would just die and go to heaven for 2 points of failure, but you still think that way. And to think of an 85 is a paper that is solid, competent, fits the requirements.
I'm thinking about students who are so scholarship driven too, that they think they have to have the A to maintain the scholarship, so in their mind they're looking at this financial side of it.
Yeah.
But you're exactly right in this idea, or I like your idea, a B is a good competent paper. It's the A that shows the excellence and above and beyond, which is the way it should be. But I don't know, in the student's mind, they're looking at it in such a different frame, which isn't fair to the educational process.
No. I had the single weakest student I have this semester dropped my class because his grades were affecting his chance at a 3.7 scholarship. And I said, dude, I mean, that's what, I can't help you. The thing about the scholarship is it's an average, right? So one class isn't going to make the difference.
No, that's not just your class. That's what you usually find out if you probe enough, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That your class is
Yeah, but that's-
perhaps the key that they've
Yeah.
identified.
By that.
Yeah.
I know when I'm grading my Gateway freshman papers, I grade them totally different in some respects to my senior business papers.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, our purpose in that class is different too. I mean, I cannot help but point out some things, but I do try to affirm them in some way. And I will, like, emotionally try to connect with them, because that's part of our purpose in there. I'll say me too, or, whatever.
Mhm.
They're telling you. Is that okay? Or should I be more just academic? Like I said, I can't help but mark.
You talking about in Gateway or you talking about the upper level?
I'm talking about Gateway,
Yeah.
the freshmen.
Well, I mean, just the more I'm thinking about this, the more a lot has to do with you being quite clear about what you want from the assignment.
Yeah.
And grading just for that. And I mean, that's the time saver, right? To know what you want and to be commenting on that alone. And for Gateway, I think sort of emoting and personalizing.
I like what you said though about commenting for the whole person. And just because they got a good grade on the paper doesn't mean that was a moral paper.
Right.
And that you applaud the idea.
Or was successful. I mean, like the one paper, it wasn't a successful paper. Like I was disturbed. Yeah.
So your good comment is great paper and your negative comment is, but you're a rotten person.
I finessed it a little bit more than that, actually. Yeah.